let me introduce to you my good friend, the senator from the great state of Texas, candidate for President of the United States, my good friend, Ted Cruz. Go get him, Brad.
That was phenomenal.
Thank you.
Wow! God bless RedState. Jim, thank you for that incredible, that extraordinary, that unbelievably kind introduction. Thank you for your leadership. Let me tell you, Jim is a fearless conservative fighter in the House of Representatives. You know, in Congress, you can pretty much measure how strongly you're standing for conservative principles by just how much you need a food taster in the members' dining room. And I think Jim employs 5 food tasters. It is great to be back here. You know, we had a nice quiet evening in Cleveland a couple of days ago. What an incredible array of candidates for president we have this year. I have to say, looking up and down that stage, seeing the young, dynamic, optimistic, forward-looking conservatives, it was powerful, it was inspirational. Then you have the Democrats. You know, I'm pretty sure the Democrats' debate consists of Hillary and the Chipotle clerk. Oh, look, that's not fair, that's not fair. Bernie Sanders has entered the race. So now the Democratic field consists of a wild-eyed socialist with ideas that are endangering America's place in the world, and Bernie Sanders. What a statement about the two sides of this debate and the conservative movement. There is life, there is vibrancy. There are 10 candidates or 17 candidates or 156 candidates. On the other side, it's like that 70s show. They're not even having a debate. You're hearing their latest thing. Maybe we'll move it to October, November, December, maybe 2017 we'll schedule the Democratic primary debate. Actually, they did plan to have a debate earlier. Problem was, the invitation was emailed to Hillary. There is a reason that the life and vibrancy, the energy, the excitement is with conservatives this year. Our country's in crisis. We know it. All across this country. You know, yesterday I had a rally in Charleston, South Carolina. Had a woman come up to me at the rally. She said, in 2008, I voted for Barack Obama. She said, in 2012, I didn't vote for anyone. I was so upset I just stayed home. And she said, in 2016, I'm with you. What I want to talk to you all about today is this is our time. I want to talk to you as leaders of the conservative movement. RedState is an incredible gathering. This is the 7th RedState. This is the 7th time I've been at RedState. I remember the first RedState at an Atlanta hotel with a gathering that wasn't much bigger than about this right here. The men and women who are here, y'all are leaders. You're bloggers, you're journalists, you're activists, you're informed thought leaders. Every person sitting here touches hundreds, touches thousands, touches tens of thousands. Listen, I know it firsthand. I wouldn't be in the United States Senate if it were not for the men and women in this room, if it were not for the leaders at RedState. There's a reason when I launched my campaign for Senate, we did it on a conference call with bloggers. Because we understand the power of serious conservative thought leaders. And you know, for a long time, the conservative movement, we've been lamenting for decades, how come nobody will stand up? How come we elect one leader after another, they talk a good game, and then when it comes to the fight, when the shooting starts, they end up cowering under their desk. This is something that we've said over and over and over again. We've got to distinguish between campaign conservatives who on the campaign trail suddenly discover they're the most conservative soul to have ever lived. It is amazing what happens on the campaign trail. Have you ever noticed, okay, last night on Cleveland, I'm pretty sure not a single person in the debate stood up and said, I'm an establishment moderate squish. I stand for nothing. Have you noticed that they run as us? That's how they run. By the way, they say if you're actually us, you're unelectable. But yet when they're running, they understand their message doesn't sell. The men and women in this room can play a critical role leading the conservative movement in assessing the records of every candidate running. I'm going to suggest to you a simple test. Each of you, I would encourage you, make a list of the 10 or 12 most important issues, the biggest fights of the last several years. And you decide, based on the issues that matter to you, whether it's fiscal conservative issues or social conservative issues or national security issues, constitutional issues, you make the list. And ask of every candidate running whether he or she has stood up and led on those issues in any meaningful way. This is a room of educated, serious political observers and activists and leaders. Ask of any candidate, here's my list. When have you stood up and fought to stop Obamacare? Not talked about it, but stood in the foxholes when incoming was coming at you. When have you stood and fought against President Obama's illegal and unconstitutional executive amnesty? When have you stood and fought against the debt that's bankrupting our kids and grandkids? When have you stood and fought to defend the First Amendment, free speech, and especially religious liberty? And I got to tell you, Indiana was a time for choosing. There were so many Republican leaders who ran for the hills. On the Second Amendment, where were you when Harry Reid and Barack Obama tried to come after our right to keep and bear arms? On the Fourth Amendment, what have you done to stop the federal government from seizing the cell phone communications and emails of law-abiding citizens? On the 10th Amendment, where are you on Common Core? And have you always opposed it, or did you just magically oppose it the day you announced for president? On marriage, are you willing to stand and lead? Or when the Supreme Court justices violated their oaths and issued a lawless decision, did you come out with some mealy-mouthed statement about law of the land, accept it, surrender, move on? on life. When have you stood and fought on life, on Planned Parenthood? How are you leading? And are you looking for a meaningless show vote, or do you actually want leadership to stop the atrocity that is what appears to be an ongoing criminal organization of Planned Parenthood? On Israel, what have you done standing and leading the fight to stand with Israel? On ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism in Iran, when have you stood and fought to lead? That's the test. Those are my dozen. But I'd encourage each of you, find your own dozen that you think are the biggest fights of the day and ask of every candidate, what's their record? What have they actually done leading on those issues? That's what the men and women in this room can do more effectively than anyone else, is dive down beyond the talking points to the actual records. Now, why does it matter so much? You know, it matters because over and over again, we keep winning. And then we lose. We win elections, and then the people we elect don't do what they say. We were told, if only you can get the House of Representatives, things will be different. So in 2010, millions of Americans, led by the men and women in this room, rose up. We won the House. And virtually nothing changed. Then we were told, okay, the problem's the Senate. You guys don't understand. It's just a half of a third of the government. You can't do it with just the House. So we said, fine. Harry Reid's the problem. In 2014, millions of Americans rose up in an historic election. We won the Senate. We retired Harry Reid as majority leader. And what exactly has this new Republican majority accomplished? It's actually even worse than that. All right, I got to say, though, in hearing nothing, I'm reminded of one of those great scenes from The Untouchables, where Robert De Niro as Capone says, man stands at the bait with a bat in his hand, alone, but without his team. What is he? Nothing! It's worse than that. In this case, our team's playing for the other side. November 2014, we won historic majorities in both houses. What happened since then? What happened is the Republican back joined with Harry Reid and passed a $1 trillion cromnibus plan filled with corporate welfare and pork. Then the Republican majority voted to fund Obamacare, to fund President Obama's executive amnesty, to fund Planned Parenthood, and then Republican leadership led the fight to confirm Loretta Lynch as Attorney General of the United States. Here's one simple question. Which of those decisions is one iota different than it would have been with Harry Reid and the Democrats in the Senate? This is why we're frustrated. And this is why the men and women in this room have such an important role to ask of every candidate running. Don't just tell me how you've stood up to Democrats, particularly in a context that didn't really matter much. Show me when you stood up to your own party. Show me where you've stood up to Republican leadership and the Washington cartel and stood with the people. Now, a lot of folks in the media want to convince us nothing can be done. It's too complicated. It's too big. You can't change the country. They want to tell us that everyone here give up, go home, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Let me take a minute to expand on my closing statement in Cleveland. Let me tell you what I intend to do on my first day in office if I'm elected president. On January 20th, 2017, the first thing I intend to do is rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action taken by Barack Obama. And that's why we're going to win. You know, the president is fond of saying he has a phone and he has a pen. Well, you live by the pen, you die by the pen. But it's not just been the White House and executive orders that have been lawless. The entire executive administration has been corrupted by the partisan lawlessness of this administration. If I'm elected president, the second thing that I will do on January 20th, 2017 is instruct the Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any criminal violations that are uncovered. The rule of law matters. The Department of Justice is a fair and impartial enforcer of the laws, regardless of which party is in power. That's how our Constitution was meant to work. The third thing I intend to do on January 20th, 2017 is instruct the Department of Justice and the IRS and every agency in the federal government that you will cease today persecuting religious liberty in this country. The Little Sisters of the Poor, a Catholic charity persecuted for standing for their religious faith, instead of receiving a legal summons from the Obama Justice Department, will receive a notice in the mail that the case against them has been dismissed. And accompanying that will be an invitation for the Little Sisters to come to the White House and tell their courageous story to the world. The fourth thing I intend to do on January 20th is rip up and rescind this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. A couple of weeks ago, I observed if this deal goes into effect, the Obama administration will become the world's leading global financier of radical Islamic terrorism. In response, a little over a week ago, President Obama from Africa took time out of his busy schedule to attack me directly for daring to say such a thing. He seemed very dismayed, and I do so hate dismaying the man. Very dismayed. He said that language was too much. You can't say that. Sadly, a number of Republicans have echoed those comments. have said the rhetoric is too much. Don't use language like that. That's what Mitt Romney tweeted. That's what Jeb Bush has said. No, 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 no. Don't say such things. Let me say something right now. Truth is not rhetoric. Nowhere in his attack on me from Africa did President Obama actually dispute the facts of what I said. Here are the facts. Number one, Iran is today and will remain the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. Number two, if this deal goes through, over $100 billion will flow directly to Iran. Number three, of that money, billions will be given to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, to radical Islamic terrorists around the world. Now, if there are hundreds of billions of dollars in the control of the American government that go directly to jihadists that use that money to murder Americans and Israelis and Europeans, then the facts are incontrovertible. If President Obama doesn't like the rhetoric that he should stop being the world's leading global financier of radical Islamic terrorism, then he should stop financing radical Islamic terrorism. And we will not win if we're afraid to speak the truth. To speak the truth with a smile, to speak the truth from love, but to speak the truth with absolute courage that the truth will set us free. The fifth thing I intend to do on January 20th, 2017 is begin the process to move the United States Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital of Israel. And you know, candidates for president, Republicans and Democrats, have promised to do that over and over and over again. And when they get to the White House, one after the other doesn't follow through. Let me give you a very simple difference, I believe, between me and the other folks standing on that debate stage in Cleveland. With me, you know exactly what you're going to get, and I'm going to do exactly what I told you I would do. Let me make a final point about how we win. You know, the media and the Democrats, although I repeat myself, they love to tell us a conservative can't win. They say it over and over and over again. Here's their basic rule. Anytime you stand up for conservative principles, you'll get the living daylights beaten out of you. Democrats will attack you. The media will attack you. Republicans will attack you. And then they immediately say, well, if you've had the living daylights beaten out of you, then you can't be elected. That quickly reduces to we can only nominate someone who's never stood for conservative principles. And every time we do that, we lose. You know, I'll tell you, Heidi and I spent many months thinking about and praying whether to launch this campaign. Our daughters, Catherine and Caroline, they're 4 and 7. You don't lightly throw a young family into the maelstrom that is a political presidential campaign. The single biggest factor that led us to go forward is that we have to win this race. And as I look at the rest of the field, there are a lot of young, talented candidates who I like, who I respect, who are friends of mine. But I don't see a whole lot of candidates who I think can energize and mobilize and inspire and bring back the millions of conservatives, the evangelical Christians, the Reagan Democrats, the young people that we've got to bring back to win. And the reason we decided to run is that I believe I'm in the best position to energize and mobilize and bring back to the polls those millions of conservatives and to rebuild that Reagan coalition, to bring together conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians and young people and Hispanics and women and Reagan Democrats. That's how we win. We win standing with hardworking men and women, a populist campaign against the bipartisan corruption of Washington. When we launched the campaign, the New York Times said, Cruz cannot win because the Washington elites despise him. I kind of thought that was the whole point of the campaign. But here's the thing that's powerful, that's transformational. You know, the Times went on to say, okay, fine, maybe the grassroots will be with Cruz. But he ain't going to have any money. Because the lobbyists in the Washington cartel, they control all the money, and all the lobbyists are with other candidates running because they're not going to rock the boat or end the gravy train. All of us filed our first fundraising reports a couple of weeks ago. Out of 17 Republican candidates running for president, you know which candidate raised the most hard money for the campaign? I'll give you one tweak to that. I didn't do that. You did. We raised $14.3 million in just over 3 months. Second place was Jeb Bush at $11.4 million. Now, if anyone would have said Cruz was going to outraise every Republican candidate, including outraising Jeb Bush by $3 million, you'd have said I was stark, raving, bark at the moon nuts. But here's how we did it. We had over 175,000 contributions from all 50 states and all 5 territories. The average contribution was $68. We had people from all over the country go to tedcruz.org. 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 Here's an amazing statistic. We have donors in roughly half the zip codes in America. 48.1%. That is the power of the men and women in this room. That is the power of the grassroots. If we're going to beat the Washington cartel, the only way it's ever been done was in 1980, the Reagan Revolution that came from the people. If we do it together, if we stand up together, the only force strong enough to turn this country around is we the people. And that's exactly what we're going to do, because this is our time to take America back.
So I got a ton of questions for the senator. Y'all won't mind taking a few minutes of your lunch break to ask Ted Cruz questions.
Oddly enough, Eric, that was not the experience 2 nights ago.
Well, we'll make up for it now. So, John from Leonardstown, Maryland. Our position as a world leader has eroded. Doors are being opened to our enemies. What will you do in terms of foreign policy to correct this? And do you have any thoughts on Cuba?
Yes. We need a strong commander-in-chief. The 2 things that change the fastest with a new president are executive action and foreign policy. It's worth remembering that in 1981, Iran released our hostages the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. There's a reason when I talked about what I intended to do the first day, that 2 of them were very directly focused on foreign policy. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem is a statement to the world: we will stand by our friends and allies no matter the criticism from the intelligentsia at the United Nations. And ripping up the Iran deal is a powerful statement because, look, this election, in many ways the most important issue in this election, both in the primary and the general, is the threat of a nuclear Iran. It's the one threat that could murder millions of Americans. And I got to tell you, I cannot wait to stand on the debate stage with Hillary Clinton. And to make clear, if you vote for Hillary, you are voting for Iran to have nuclear weapons. And if I'm elected president, under no circumstances will a nation led by a theocratic zealot who leads chants of death to America be allowed to acquire the weapons that could murder millions of Americans. When it comes to radical Islamic terrorism, I think we need to rediscover Ronald Reagan's strategy for the Cold War. We win, they lose.
We have variations of the next question from several people, including this one from Taryn in Madison, Wisconsin. The government shuts down every weekend. Why are Republican leaders so afraid of the fight over Planned Parenthood?
Because they're not on our side.
Amen.
And let me actually take a minute to explain something, because sometimes folks complain, how come our leadership isn't very good, they're unwilling to fight, they're not competent? None of that's true. Leadership is actually quite effective and quite willing to fight. They're just not fighting for us. So, for example, when it comes to cronyism and corporate welfare, when it comes to the Export-Import Bank, leaders in both houses will fight ferociously with a knife between their teeth, crawling over broken glass. Why? Because what they're doing is they're listening and they're part of the Washington cartel. The giant corporations getting taxpayer-guaranteed loans come with wheelbarrows full of campaign checks. And so a couple of weeks ago, when I shared some thoughts about Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, I was told the same thing that I was told when I shared thoughts about Iran. That rhetoric, you can't say that, and the truth is not rhetoric. standing up and speaking the truth. Here's the truth. Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid are arm in arm working together to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank and to continue the cronyism and corporate welfare of Washington. It's not two parties, it's one party, the party of Washington, the McConnell-Reid leadership team. So when it comes to something like a shutdown, let's take the issue of Planned Parenthood. So in the midst of the highway bill, I stood with Mike Lee and we fought to have an amendment at a 50-vote threshold where it could matter to actually defund Planned Parenthood. We weren't blocked by the Democrats from doing that. We were blocked by Republican leadership. And I got to tell you, there are 54 Republican senators, and yet when we were standing there, Mike Lee and I were standing alone, fighting to actually defund Planned Parenthood. Now, instead, leadership likes to have show votes. So we schedule a vote with a 60-vote threshold that we know we'll lose. All the Republicans vote yes, all the Democrats vote no. We pat ourselves on the back. And their view is they're not actually trying to fight for the issues we care about. They're not fighting to defund. Not fighting to stop Obamacare. They certainly aren't fighting to stop executive amnesty or illegal immigration or pass Kate's Law or end sanctuary cities. Because the Washington cartel supports bigger government and supports illegal immigration. And so their standard response anytime you say, let us use the constitutional powers of Congress to change what's happening. The Democrats say, well, if you do anything like that, we will hold the government hostage and shut down the government. And the Republican leadership says, oh, never mind, we'll just cut a deal to grow government instead. The problem is they're not listening to us. We need to change that. And the way you change it is the grassroots holding all of us accountable.
Okay. So before I ask the next question, it'll be the last question. I just noticed the crowd. It's a good thing the fire marshal's a Ted Cruz supporter. So I've got this question from California, Florida, Georgia, and New Jersey, and it's all the same question. This one, you can probably give a good concise one on this. In your time in Washington, have you yet figured out what it means to lead from behind?
Well, sure, Republican congressional leadership does it every day. On foreign policy, leading from behind means withdrawing from the world, abandoning our friends and allies. Imagine, for example, all right, 7 years ago, the first red state, in that little Atlanta ballroom. Imagine I would have suggested that we were going to see a Democratic president who Prime Minister Netanyahu would come to America to address a joint session of Congress, and the president, the vice president, and every member of the cabinet would boycott the elected Prime Minister of Israel, and the president would refuse to see him at the White House. Every one of you would have said, frankly, what's being said about me, now that rhetoric's crazy. That'll never happen. That's black helicopter loony stuff. You know what? That's leading from behind. Have you noticed that every bad actor, every enemy of America is stronger after 6.5 years of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy? Putin is stronger. China is stronger. China just did a massive hack into our federal government records. Russia just did a massive hack into the Pentagon the day after General Soleimani, the head of the Al-Quds forces from Iran, returned in open violation of the sanctions. ISIS, who you recall not long ago the president told us was the junior varsity, is crucifying Christians and beheading children. Iran is on the verge of acquiring a nuclear weapon. You know, Prime Minister Netanyahu was right. He said the one person telling the truth about this Iranian nuclear deal is Rouhani. Rouhani's saying we got everything we wanted. You know, I saw an editorial cartoon recently that sums it up perfectly. It has Khamenei, the Ayatollah, saying, "Death to every American." And it has John Kerry saying, "Can we meet you halfway?" That's leading from behind.
Senator Ted Cruz.